so that Netanyahu, who's been weakened, can go back to his partners and say, look what I've achieved. And so his coalition would hold together, because the key problem right now for Trump is that the second phase is where the second phase of the ceasefire is where Netanyahu told his allies that we're going back to fighting. And I think that Trump wants the second phase to move forward. And so there's no solution here. You either go to war or you continue with a ceasefire. And so I think Trump's, again, speculation, what Trump did was that he gave Netanyahu this hope for the future. Maybe Netanyahu sees through it, but anyway, his coalition, this hope for the future, so that they will accept continuing with the second stage. And remember, Trump also said the third stage, that, that's all nonsense, that's unacceptable. So that you can add that. Of course, if there's ethnic cleansing, there won't be a third stage. But I think that's basically it. That's how I understand it. I think that Trump wants to see this ceasefire continue. He wants the second phase to go through, and he's given Netanyahu this gift so that he can stay in power. And that's basically what Netanyahu wants more than anything else. I think has been immensely destructive for the Israeli regime. I think it's the beginning of the end of the regime. I'm not saying the end is tomorrow or next year, but I think that Netanyahu does not take into account the interests of the future of the regime. It's all about himself, and Trump is using this to keep Netanyahu happy and his coalition intact. Actually, I think that this is another element that the United States or Trump doesn't take into consideration. First of all, with regards to Saudi Arabia and these countries. And here, I think that this is a part of it. What the Israelis did during this almost 16 months of genocide was that they have weakened all of these Arab countries and even Erdogan by showing their hypocrisy, by the sheer fact that they were silent or they never did anything to support the Palestinians. They were all weakened, some more, some less. Erdogan, of course, through his speeches and bluster, his base. He's sort of like Trump. He has a base that will stick with him no matter what happens. But many are turned against it. And in the region, in Jordan, in Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere, people have been very angry because of the silence of their government. So Netanyahu has weakened these countries that are in the American camp. But what Trump did, I think, further weakens them, because it doesn't matter if Saudi Arabia has given the green light to expel all these Palestinians, or if Egypt has given the green light, or Jordan has given the green light. I doubt they did have. But it will raise questions among ordinary people in these countries. Are they doing a secret deal behind our backs? Are our governments betraying the Palestinian people again? And this only further undermines these regimes. And in addition to that, you see the destruction of Syria, which, as I said earlier, is a threat to Saudi Arabia. These Wahhabi groups, these Salafist groups, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, countries that they threaten first and foremost are countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, potentially. And it also, by the way, this policy is going to further the divide between the Saudis and the Turks, and the Saudis and the Emiratis on the one hand, and Qatar on the other. So they're only making it. What Trump has done is that he's made it more complicated for the U.S. camp, and it's going to make these countries more in a more difficult situation, potentially more closer to some form of instability. So the last 16, 17 months have been disastrous for all of them because of their indifference, their silence, or their collaboration, exporting oil or transporting goods or or doing trade or preserving political ties. It's damaged them, but this has just taken it a step further. So what we're seeing today is it seems everything is quiet, but I think underneath a lot of things are happening. So Syria, Trump's behavior, all of that is potentially very dangerous for the U.S. position in West Asia, North Africa, and beyond, because the world is watching, and it doesn't look good for the United States. So this has the relationship between Iran and Russia has changed dramatically, and it's not going to be reversed. And another problem with this uh, madman behavior is that even if Trump wants to have a better relationship with Iran and Russia, this behavior not only makes it almost impossible to negotiate and to trust any negotiation, but also it enhances the position or belief that you can't put any eggs in the American basket. So let's say Russia does do a deal with the United States over Ukraine in the future, or Iran does some sort of deal in the future, or does negotiate with the United States in the future. I don't think that the Iranians will contemplate for a moment taking a couple of eggs out of the Chinese basket or the Indian basket or the Russian basket and putting them in the American basket, because there's no trust. It will take decades for people to rethink that. I think the same is true with Russia. I think the Russians are not going to say, okay, we'll relinquish this part of our relationship with Iran or with China and then put our bags or our eggs in the American basket. And this, of course, is something that people in MAGA, some of them their objective all along in 2016 was to bring the Russians into the American camp and to have this big coalition and directed against others. But events over the past 8 years, I think, have destroyed that and have made everyone much more cautious. The Iran and Russia, as you rightly point out, have a history which is not positive, has not been positive. The wars in the past, also the Soviet Union, but ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Iranian-Russian relations have evolved. And especially during the last 3 years, they've evolved very rapidly. And ironically, it's been the United States and the Europeans that have acted as the catalyst. Otherwise, the North-South corridor is something that should have been developed decades ago. But as you rightly pointed out, because of that mistrust, and also because we have always been Eurocentric too, and both us and the Russians, we've always been, even though we've been saying that the world is changing and Asia is rising, but we still have that old tendency to stick to the past, to cling to something that is literally melting before us, like ice under the sun. Well, so we weren't really thinking about Russia. We thought Russia, perhaps we did think that Russia was just a gas station, and that it had been. Probably they were thinking the same about Iran in many respects. But the United States has forced the two countries to rethink things, and now the two countries see that the potential is huge, and that they've made such a huge mistake by not rethinking their policies or building this relationship decades ago. The top two countries in natural gas reserves, two countries with huge mineral reserves and oil, and of course the North-South corridor is itself has huge potential for Russia. Its trade across East Asia, Southern Asia, and the Persian Gulf region in Africa, but also for Iran across Russia with all its potential and beyond, because wars won't be forever. Iran's trade with Europe and the trade of much of the Asia could go right through this corridor towards Europe when ultimately the war comes to an end and things change, whether it's 1 year from now or 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. The United States and Iran, and not just Iran, this region, if it wasn't for one major factor, there's no reason why the relationship between the United States and the people of this region could not be infinitely better. But the reason that it isn't is Israel. It is because the influence of the Israeli regime in AIPAC and its lobby in the United States is immense. And again, the Israelis or Tel Aviv has acted, its interests are detrimental to the interests of Washington. I think that the burden of Israel for the United States is enormous, and its existence is detrimental to U.S. interests. But that's my view. You know that before the coup in 1950, Iranians had a favorable view of the United States. They saw it as sort of, or many Iranians, as like anti-colonial and different from the Europeans. Now, of course, those who know American history may not see this as an accurate understanding of the United States before 1953. But in any case, the perception in Iran towards the United States was very different than their perception towards the British or the Russians. And that all went downhill after the coup, where the United States overthrew the national government and reinstalled the Shah, and then helped him through creating a brutal secret police to maintain power until the revolution. And during the revolution, the Americans under Carter supported the killings on the streets of Tehran and other cities. And after the revolution, they used the embassy to undermine the country, and they gave refuge to the Shah, and then they supported Saddam. And so it just continued to get worse and worse. So I think that while Iran would like to have a reasonable relationship with the United States, I don't think that anyone here who is serious believes that to be possible at the moment. Iran-Turkish relations are a bit different. It's more complicated. Of course, Azeri and Turkish are not the same. Not the same. They have similarities, but the leader is Azeri. Ayatollah Khamenei. He's is an Azeri city in Iran. Marandi, my name means from Marand, which is another Azeri city very close to Tabriz. And of course, the president is from Tabriz. But I think actually Iranian Azeris, their view is that the Republic of Azerbaijan belongs to Iran. And so they are very nationalistic, and their religious identity in general is probably a bit above average than the ordinary Iranian. I think that Turkey is, from what I'm hearing from inside Turkey, from my friends in the Akaf, because Iran has a very long relationship with the party. Iran helped them come to power. The rise of the party under different names. It was, the movement was created by Najmuddin Erbakan, who was if he was alive today, he would be very different from Mr. Erdogan. He was a very sincere and courageous person who created this movement in the country. And I think the relationship, I think he would have been a part of, Turkey would have been in BRICS by now. His relationship with Iran and Russia would have been completely different, and we would have had a very different West Asia. Right now, Mr. Erdogan and Qatar, they are dealing with a massive catastrophe. The Syrian economy has been destroyed. Things are much worse now than they were under President Assad. These groups are not united; they're deeply divided. The economy, the bureaucracy has fallen apart. And the Israelis have destroyed the country's, much of the country's infrastructure, what was left of it, and they've occupied new territories. And these extremist groups are killing minorities and Sunni Sufis, and of course, we all see how bad things are. So, and this is like a black hole for Turkey, because they're the ones. It's theirs now. They own it, and I think that Turkey is recognizing, despite the initial euphoria, that this is not going to end well. But I think Mr. Erdogan, from what I understand from my friends in the party, and also people from outside the party, I have friends among them too. Apparently, there is buyer's remorse. In Syria, they never expected to take the country. they never expected to even take Aleppo. The objective apparently was to reach the outskirts of Aleppo so that he could have a stronger hand at the negotiating table. Syria collapsed. So Turkey has tilted towards Iran. After a couple of weeks of euphoria, they are now trying to find some sort of solutions through negotiating with Iran. Iran wants Turkey in our camp. Iran wants Turkey to be with Russia, Iran, with BRICS, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But I think Mr. Erdogan, he is sort of like Trump. He's, people would always say Erdogan's very smart. He knows how to play both sides. But again, when you're always playing both sides, at the end of the day, no one trusts you. And if you don't have anyone's trust, I think in the long run, the damage that is caused is much greater than the benefits that are gained. And I think Trump wants the ceasefire to continue. I don't think Trump wants any conflict with Iran, obviously, because it's not something that the United States can win. And I don't think that he wants the fighting to continue in Gaza because it's undermining the United States and it will undermine him. When you have people like Tucker Carlson speaking the way he does about the Israeli regime or inviting guests to speak in a certain way about the Israeli regime, when you have people like Candace Owens, among others, who are now highly critical of the regime in the MAGA camp, then I think you have a problem. And of course, other segments of American society will pounce upon anything that could hurt Trump. Completely hypocritical position, but it does show that that if fighting continues in Gaza, these people will also join and ban and also join this the group and attack Trump. So as world public opinion shifted, I think Trump saw a ceasefire as an opportunity for himself, for his own personal benefit. And so he basically pushed for the ceasefire. And but the day before his inauguration, the agreement was accepted by all sides. But I think by talking about ethnic cleansing in Gaza, what he's doing is he's probably not serious. Again, that's my interpretation, my speculation. It may be completely false, but I think he's not serious about it because I don't think it can be done anyway. And that's why Hezbollah joined the fighting to stop it. That's why Yemen joined the fighting to stop it. But I think he's giving this fake concession, let's say, what appears to be a concession to Netanyahu. But in any case, and by expanding into Syria, they're more overstretched. So even though some in Western media they speak euphoric of the situation for Israel, and some people in Israel were euphoric, but I think it's clear that the situation for Netanyahu is not good, and the fact that he's ill contributes to this weakness. He has not achieved anything in Gaza except for slaughter, which I think has destroyed the image of the Israeli regime. Probably the greatest defeat for the regime is that the world now sees it as it sees any evil regime in human history. That I think is the greatest defeat for it. But he has gained nothing in Gaza. He's gained nothing in Lebanon, despite early on using the beepers and the shock and awe airstrikes where he martyred senior officials in Hezbollah and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. Afterwards, Hezbollah regrouped and they basically held the Israeli regime, their troops back on the border. And the fighting on the Lebanese border was the heaviest fighting that ever took place in any conflict between Tel Aviv and any other entity. It's evil, it's disgusting, and it should be condemned. And actually, it's good for Iran in a way and the resistance and the axis of resistance because it helps again show that the United States is standing with the Israeli regime, and it it puts the United States in a very bad light, and that's always beneficial. But I think there is a, a more, I'm guessing that there is a more complicated reason for this, which again, it doesn't, I'm not trying to downplay the significance of the statement in the sense that it's absolutely immoral. But I do think there's a reason why he did this. The last 2 months of fighting was unprecedented, but still they failed to make any significant inroads. So on these two fronts, they had no success. I don't think it in the long run it achieves any results. I think actually it's going to hurt Turkey and countries in the region that are in the American camp because they are the ones who are vulnerable to this culture of extremism and Salafism and Wahhabism and Al Qaeda and ISIS ideology.